Imagine standing on the moon's shadowed crater Alphonsus, the lunar dust shimmering under the distant sun, every footstep echoing through your suit like a heartbeat in the void. What if I told you that during the golden era of Apollo, when humanity's gaze first turned outward in earnest, there was one secret mission so daring, so scientifically audacious, that it nearly returned proof of extraterrestrial life itself? In the tumult of 1970, as news of Apollo 13's harrowing ordeal rippled across the globe, a clandestine group of exobiologists and engineers at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston convened in windowless rooms lit by fluorescent hum. Their purpose was unprecedented: to conceive Apollo 20, a mission whose primary objective was not merely geology or engineering triumphs, but the direct detection of alien microbes beneath the regolith. Drawing on early survey data from precursor orbiters, they noted puzzling methane spikes hovering over the South Pole, signals so consistent that some whispered they could only be biological in origin. Undeterred by the risks, Dr. Carla Reyes spearheaded the development of a compact gas chromatograph capable of isolating trace organic compounds at parts per trillion levels, an instrument small enough to fit within the command module's belly, yet sensitive enough to sniff out the faintest metabolic byproducts. Simultaneously, Dr. Amitabh Singh's laser-induced fluorescence unit was calibrated to identify chlorophyll-like pigments under pulsed ultraviolet bursts, potentially revealing photosynthetic organisms dormant beneath translucent ice. Meanwhile, microscopic images assembled by Dr. Helena Fritzinger were tested under simulated lunar vacuum and temperature extremes, tasked with capturing structures no larger than a few micrometers, tiny fossilized cell walls that could rewrite our understanding of life's tenacity. Every prototype underwent grueling trials, soil simulants baked at 60 degrees Celsius to mimic daytime heating, then plunged to -180 degrees Celsius for the frigid lunar nights, each cycle replicating the moon's punishing environment. Recording these tests, NASA's internal memos brimmed with cautious optimism, noting that several runs yielded organic signatures that defy purely abiotic explanations. Yet for every glimmer of hope, darker whispers circulated. What if opening Pandora's box of alien life triggered fear, religious panic, or geopolitical upheaval? Funding battles erupted in the mahogany-paneled halls of Capitol Hill, where powerful legislators, still reeling from the cost of the Vietnam War, argued that NASA should focus on television-friendly milestones rather than painstaking science. "We can land a man on the moon," one senator is quoted as saying in a redacted transcript, "but can we really find little green men in dust samples?" Back in Houston, mission planners wrestled with these pressures even as astronauts trained, under the watchful eyes of suit technicians and exobiologists alike. Commander Joseph "Joe" Caldwell, a decorated test pilot with a penchant for unanswerable questions, volunteered enthusiastically for Apollo 20's crew, often spending long nights poring over lab reports alongside Dr. Reyes. Flight logs describe moments of shared excitement. Caldwell and his lunar module pilot, Lieutenant Commander Elaine Vasquez, debating whether to focus sampling near Shackleton Crater's permanently shadowed ridges or the sunlit terraces of Tycho, where meteorite impacts might have delivered extraterrestrial organic precursors. All this unfolded against a backdrop of political uncertainty. In October of 1971, the White House ordered a freeze on any mission that couldn't guarantee a safe return by fiscal year 1973, citing tightening budgets and public fatigue. Officially, NASA cited safety concerns, claiming another lunar landing so soon after Apollo 17 risked mission overlap and hardware exhaustion. But declassified logs released decades later tell a more enigmatic tale. During a final rehearsal of the life detection sequence, sensors aboard the mobile laboratory recorded unexplained fluctuations, methane surges followed by abrupt drops, rhythmic patterns no instrument technician could fully explain. The control room fell silent when readings were transmitted to Earth, and the mission's lead engineer received a directive marked "Eyes Only," ordering immediate destruction of the raw telemetry. Today, most history books gloss over Apollo 20, relegating it to a footnote or dismissing it as a budget casualty. Yet the mission's pioneering instruments laid the groundwork for modern exobiology, influencing everything from Viking's Martian experiments to the life detectors aboard today's interplanetary probes. Imagine if even a single Martian-like microbe had been uncovered in lunar dust. Our textbooks, our philosophies, our religions might have rewritten themselves overnight. But that discovery remains tantalizingly out of reach, buried in government archives and the fading memories of a select few engineers and astronauts. So for now, we're left with the echo of what might have been, and the question that still haunts the aerospace community. Did NASA cancel Apollo 20 to hide unsettling evidence, or to avoid a scientific spectacle the world wasn't ready? Set a handle. It began with a question scrawled in pencil on a notepad during a routine meeting at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. What if life isn't exclusive to Earth? That scribbled line belonged to Dr. Carla Reyes, a microbiologist who had joined NASA in the wake of the Apollo 11 triumph, determined to steer the agency's ambitions toward biology rather than only rocks and craters. Her vision wasn't fantasy, it was rooted in science. By 1970, research was already suggesting that microbial life on Earth could survive in the harshest of places, boiling acidic springs, radioactive mine shafts, even within Antarctic ice. If Earth's organisms could endure such extremes, then why not similar life elsewhere, like deep beneath the moon's polar crust? And so, Apollo 20 was born not from the ambition to conquer space, but from the need to understand it. From the beginning, Apollo 20 was a different beast. The standard mission plans, site surveys, core drills, gravity readings were altered to include what Reyes called the EXO package. These instruments were experimental, cutting-edge, and deeply controversial. One, a compact version of a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, was capable of detecting volatile organic compounds in minute concentrations. Another was a rudimentary DNA amplifier, an early conceptual forerunner to modern PCR technology, meant to test for polymer chains that might mimic earthly genetic material. And finally, a strange-looking cube with retractable micro-lances designed to probe deeper than any tool before it, penetrating several meters into ice-rich regolith. Each was tested in the vacuum chambers of the Johnson Space Center, where temperatures were swung from plus 120 degrees Celsius down to minus 180, simulating lunar day and night. The devices worked mostly. Some failed catastrophically. Others yielded curious results. But the vision was clear. Apollo 20 would search not just for rocks, but for relics of biology. Behind these developments were people. Real, passionate people. Dr. Reyes, ever the idealist, believed that microbial life on the moon could be ancient, even pre-Earth. She clashed often with NASA's more conservative leadership, who viewed her enthusiasm as bordering on reckless. Then there was Commander Joe Caldwell, selected personally by Deke Slayton, a former Navy test pilot with nerves of steel and a surprisingly poetic mind. Caldwell once remarked during a press briefing, "I'm not going up there to plant another flag. I'm going to dig where no one else would." He was joined by Lieutenant Commander Elaine Vasquez, a geochemist turned astronaut with sharp instincts and sharper resolve. Vasquez had spent years studying lunar breccia, and her belief in Reyes' theories was unwavering. The third seat belonged to Michael "Mickey" Harlan, a systems engineer chosen for his uncanny ability to troubleshoot under pressure, a necessity given how experimental their payload truly was. They trained in secret. NASA gave no press releases. No mission patch was released. Internally, Apollo 20 was designated Survey Orion, a name buried in logistics files and never spoken in public. The crew ran simulations in complete lockdown, sometimes performing drills in the desert outside White Sands, under the guise of high-altitude avionics tests. But within those drills, they rehearsed not only touchdown procedures, but precise sample collection sequences. Vasquez's notebook contained hand-sketched diagrams of sample sites, particularly the eternally shadowed floor of Shoemaker Crater, where frozen water and unusual mineral anomalies hinted at geothermal vents. Caldwell memorized emergency communication codes that didn't exist in any other Apollo mission, and Reyes, still technically a civilian consultant, became their unofficial science officer, reviewing every protocol, triple-checking each piece of equipment for cross-contamination. But not everyone inside NASA supported the mission. At a pivotal flight readiness review in February of 1972, a senior official from the Office of Space Science reportedly raised concerns about the EXO package. According to a now declassified memo, the concern wasn't about feasibility, it was about perception. Discovery of life, however microbial, could trigger backlash from religious organizations, foreign governments, and within our own Congress. We must consider if we're prepared for what we might find. This moment, documented, debated, and still controversial, may have been the first nail in Apollo 20's coffin. Yet the team pressed on. In March of that year, a final systems integration test was performed in Building 32. The results were stunning. The instruments returned trace signatures from a lunar analog sample, signatures that mimicked methane-producing bacteria found in Siberian permafrost. One senior technician, whose logbook remained sealed until 2004, wrote, "Either something's wrong with the simulator, or we've just seen the first false positive of alien life." NASA's top brass grew uneasy. Just days later, the White House held a closed-door meeting about the implications of extraterrestrial microbial detection. Although no recording exists, transcripts obtained under the Freedom of Information Act hint at chaos. Some saw it as scientific triumph, others as Pandora's box. One aide to the vice president reportedly said, "You think people panicked over Sputnik? Wait until the Pope calls a press conference." And so the countdown quietly stopped. The cancellation of Apollo 20 was abrupt. Publicly, NASA cited budgetary constraints and a desire to focus on Skylab. Internally, the crew was told that mission hardware would be reassigned. Commander Caldwell later wrote in his journal, "We had the rocket, the lander, the gear. All we needed was permission. They never said no, they just stopped saying yes, but the story doesn't end there." The data, the readings from those EXO package simulations, the test results from Building 32 weren't destroyed. They were sealed for decades. Until, in 2017, a Freedom of Information request filed by a curious astrophysicist named Dr. Lena Moravec unearthed the logs, methane pulses, spectral lines consistent with amino acids, a fragmentary telemetry signal logged in March 1972 from a test run labeled Shoemaker Sim 3. Suddenly, Apollo 20 wasn't a myth. It was real. It had nearly flown. And it had almost changed everything. When Dr. Lena Moravec unsealed the Apollo 20 logs in 2017, she wasn't looking for aliens. Her goal had been far more mundane. She was researching the origins of lunar organic detection protocols used by later Mars missions. But what she stumbled across was a digital archaeological treasure. Nearly 4,000 pages of test data, telemetry logs, instrument schematics, and internal memos detailing the most controversial Apollo mission that never flew. Hidden inside this labyrinth of technical documentation were several peculiar datasets. One labeled SIM-alpha-7 displayed spikes in trace gases, methane, ethane, and even minute amounts of formaldehyde logged during deep chamber simulation trials. Initially, Dr. Moravec assumed it was contamination, but the sample used in that test came from an ultra-sterilized lunar regolith simulant. The test chamber had been sealed for 72 hours, pre-baked and purged with argon. There should have been nothing. So where did the signal come from? Dr. Moravec enlisted help. Among her team was Dr. Ari Taguchi, an astrobiochemist known for developing biosignature detection algorithms used by the ESA mission ExoMars. Together, they ran spectral analysis on the old logs. The signature didn't match any common contaminant. It did, however, resemble metabolic byproducts generated by methanogens, anaerobic microorganisms found in Earth's most extreme environments. Could it have been a false positive? Possibly. But then came the next discovery, a series of memos exchanged between Dr. Carla Reyes and a NASA flight controller only identified as RD. In them, Reyes reported intermittent, repeating, photoluminescent spikes during tests of her ultraviolet resonance scanner. These spikes came in precise 5-second intervals, a rhythm inconsistent with any known abiotic process at the time. "Almost like a heartbeat," she wrote. The implications were staggering. If these tests, simulated in Earth-based vacuum chambers with lunar analog material, showed such patterns, what would actual lunar ice have revealed? Moravec's team wasn't the only one asking that question. A shadowy online forum frequented by retired NASA engineers and deep space enthusiasts erupted with speculation. One user, going by the handle Eagle Has Left, claimed to have been part of the original simulation chamber maintenance crew. He described being ordered to dismantle the chamber within 48 hours of Sim Alpha 7's completion. "We weren't told why," he wrote, "just that it wasn't safe to leave it intact." The whispers gained momentum. The resurfaced findings ignited a series of scientific re-examinations. Between 2018 and 2021, fewer than 4 peer-reviewed papers were published, arguing that early Apollo testing may have inadvertently generated conditions suitable for detecting pseudo-organic compounds. These findings didn't prove life, but they didn't disprove it either. And more importantly, they resurrected an old debate within the exobiology community. Could the moon actually harbor life? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. No. The moon lacks a thick atmosphere, has no liquid water on the surface, and endures punishing extremes of heat and cold. But in recent years, lunar exploration has complicated that picture. In 2010, India's Chandrayaan-1 mission detected hydroxyl molecules in the regolith, suggesting the presence of water. Later, NASA's LCROSS mission confirmed ice deposits inside permanently shadowed craters near the moon's south pole, regions that haven't seen sunlight in billions of years. These cold traps, sitting at -180 degrees Celsius, are like cosmic time capsules. Undisturbed, pristine, and geologically stable, scientists now believe that meteorites rich in amino acids and simple organics may have impacted these areas without destroying their molecular cargo. So, here's the crux of the theory. What if, during some distant epoch, a meteorite delivered a payload of prebiotic molecules into one of these icy craters? What if, shielded from radiation and preserved in stable temperatures, those molecules had time to evolve into primitive, slow-metabolizing microbial forms? Could the moon, long believed to be a sterile satellite, actually be hiding the oldest biosphere in the solar system? The implications are not just scientific, they're philosophical. Life on the moon wouldn't just mean that Earth isn't alone. It would suggest that life is common, even in places we've ignored. Dr. Moravec once said in an interview, "The moon is only sterile if you're not looking hard enough." But this view still faces resistance. Critics argue that the original Apollo 20 simulations weren't controlled well enough, that false positives were likely, and that today's instruments could do the job better. They may be right, but what stirs the imagination is not certainty, it's the possibility. Enter Artemis. With the 2020s ushering in a new era of lunar exploration, NASA's Artemis program is planning crewed landings near the moon's south pole. And quietly in the background, some of the instruments being developed echo those first imagined by Reyes and her team. Improved chromatographs, advanced fluorescent spectrometers, subsurface drills. One engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory recently hinted in an open-access seminar that Artemis payloads may include biocompatibility tests for extreme cold environments. In other words, we may finally be returning to the question Apollo 20 dared to ask over 50 years ago. Is something alive on the moon? But as we inch closer to that moment, we must also ask, what else did we bury alongside Apollo 20's cancellation? What secrets remain locked in data vaults and redacted memos? And more chillingly, why were those instruments disassembled so quickly and their telemetry erased? It began with a disappearance. On March 14, 1977, less than a year after the cancellation of Apollo 20, Dr. Carla Reyes failed to show up for a debriefing at Johnson Space Center. At first, it wasn't unusual. Delays happened, but when her apartment was entered by federal agents 3 days later, they found something strange. The place was clean, too clean. No notes, no journals, no trace of her simulation data. Even her cat was gone. All that remained was a single unmarked cassette tape resting on her desk, labeled in red ink, EVE. What's stranger? That tape has never surfaced. Dr. Reyes wasn't the only one. Records show at least 3 other team members assigned to the Apollo 20 Life Sciences Division: engineers Robert Malkin, Elissa Hardy, and flight data technician Lyle Porter, either transferred quietly to unrelated departments or resigned. From NASA altogether by mid-1978. No exit interviews, no farewell statements. According to retired systems analyst Joanne Bedford, it was like they were erased, and perhaps they were. By the early 1980s, the Apollo 20 program was already a ghost. Unfinished mock-ups were stored in hangars or repurposed. The prototype lander, nicknamed Janus, was reportedly disassembled, its components scattered across testing facilities in Houston and Cape Canaveral. Only fragments remain: a high-resolution thermal scanner now in a Smithsonian back room, an oxygen scrubber repurposed for Skylab tests, a reinforced hull frame lost in the archives of Northrop Grumman. The program's legacy was disappearing, intentionally, it seemed. Yet whispers continued. In the late 1990s, a shortwave transmission intercepted by amateur radio operator Dan Kravitz in Arizona sparked a small storm in the ufology community. The signal, looping a series of high-frequency pulses, was nearly identical to the 5-second UV spike intervals first documented by Reyes. The transmission originated from a decommissioned Cold War listening post in Greenland, once a data relay node for Apollo lunar telemetry. Coincidence? Maybe. But this incident and others like it birthed one of the most enduring conspiracy theories of lunar history, the EVE protocol. According to believers, EVE, standing for Extraterrestrial Viability Experiment, was the real name for the classified subprogram embedded within Apollo 20. They claim that NASA, upon detecting biosignature anomalies, enacted a full containment protocol. That the data wasn't just suppressed, it was quarantined. A handful of documents, like the 17 Delta memo recovered by Freedom of Information Act request in 2014, lend fuel to the fire. That document references bioenvironmental sterilization of non-conforming lunar simulants and instructs that all SIM-alpha storage matrices be incinerated without exception. Why destroy harmless material? More curiously, rumors persist that Reyes and her colleagues weren't silenced by force, but by persuasion. Some claim they were recruited into black projects under the Department of Energy. Others whisper that Reyes chose exile, relocating to the Atacama Desert under a new identity, continuing her research in secret. Every few years, a blurry photograph emerges, showing an older woman in a lab coat near an array of unfamiliar instruments, always anonymous, always out of reach. Could it be her, or are we just chasing ghosts? Whatever the truth, Apollo 20's shadow looms large. In 2025, during a public Q&A, a high-level NASA administrator was asked if any future Artemis missions would include legacy biosignature experiments. He paused, smiled, then simply said, "We're revisiting some old ideas." That might have been nothing, or it might have been everything, because the past doesn't stay buried forever. It seeps through forgotten logs, strange readings, hushed silences. So here's the question we leave you with, Cosmic Whispers family. What if the greatest discovery in human history was made, and then buried under layers of bureaucracy and fear? What if Apollo 20 didn't fail, but succeeded in revealing something we weren't ready to understand? The moon is no longer out of reach. Artemis will walk its shadows again, and who knows, maybe one of those shadows is watching back. If this story intrigued you, if it made you wonder what else might be hiding behind sealed vaults and cold regolith, then share it. Like this video. Comment with your thoughts, your theories, your questions. Let's keep the whisper going, because sometimes truth doesn't shout, it whispers from the stars, and we are listening.